So welcome to another episode. So today we have Tristram Hooley on, who is a professor of career education. So welcome to today's episode.
Hi, great to be on.
It's an interesting time for, I think, someone in a career such as yourself, because although there's so much information online about careers and what to expect, earning potential, what day to day feels like and looks like, there's also a few other issues. I think one is the AI situation and how that transpires over the short, medium, and long term, but also there seems to be a lot in the ether about finding a job that gives someone meaning as opposed to just an income. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's lots to unpack there. So I suppose the first thing to say is that nobody can ever tell you what's going to happen in the future, and our careers are our pathway into the future. So we've got to figure out not only what do we want to do, but also what kind of world are we living in, and how's that going to go. So, at the moment, we wake up one morning and Donald Trump's about to invade Greenland and go to war with Europe, and we're kind of in a position where we think, well, what anything could happen. So in that world, it's not a simple question to decide, well, what do I want to do? So there's lots of stuff going on, and I think a lot of what we're doing with our career is trying to sort through what's possible. um, and I think I'm very much in favor of the idea that our careers are not just about making as much money as we can. I mean, of course, getting a good job, getting decent work, being able to make money and put food on the table, all of that stuff's really important. And paid work is really important for most people. But your career is actually about more than that. It's about how you join together the different aspects of your life. And so, you can have a really highly paid job and be utterly miserable. And so you need to think, well, what is it I want out of my life? How do I manage the different aspects of my life? How do I put them together in a way that's going to make sense for me, allow me to make the kind of difference that I want to make in the world? So yeah, I think careers are really complicated. That's why they interest me, because we're juggling with all of this stuff, all of these big political issues, all these things about what we want, and all of these different parts of our lives.
100%. And as you said about the current affairs, the state of the global landscape, as it were. But I think also there's an issue with people wanting to be other people. There's an old Aesop fable, the ass and the lapdog, I think it's called, where the ass is doing all the work in the yard, and they see the lapdog sitting on the king's lap getting all the strokes, all of the love, and he thinks, well, it must be the fact that he's doing that, so I'm going to do that. But obviously the ass is huge, jumped on the king and ended up cutting up his face and injuring him because he wanted to be something he wasn't, because he saw the benefits of doing that. Do you find that a lot within the career spaces? Oh, well, he does that, that must be successful. But actually, you're a fish trying to climb a tree, to use the old analogy. It's like myself. I could not be a 100-meter sprinter because I haven't got the physique of someone like Usain Bolt. I haven't got a certain leg span, certain speed, certain height. So do you think there's a case of trying to find what skills you have, what makes you tick?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, absolutely. I mean, there are we've all got limits. We've all got, and those limits are physical, they're mental, they're in terms of our desires, our interests, and so on. So I've had jobs which I haven't enjoyed, and I've not been as good at them, and so on. So there's lots. I think there's lots of constraints, but I think the only thing that I'd be a bit careful about this is um, human beings are actually incredibly malleable. We can change, we can develop, we can move ourselves in new different directions. And I think sometimes, particularly when people are in school or in education, and also when you're in a family, you're growing up in a family, you take a particular role in the family, it can be easy to sort of conclude, well, I'm like this, I'm not the clever one, or I'm not the sporty one, or whatever. And in reality, you have got the capacity to change and develop. So I think we should be a bit careful about sort of locking ourselves into, well, we are one thing and we can only ever be one thing. And see it more as we want to find things that fit with our interests, our unique set of talents, and so on. But we also want to find some things that stretch us, that pull us in new directions, and that's fine as well. So yeah.
100%. And I think, as you said, it's not just about this one thing, it's about being able to learn a lot of these other skills that come and form part of what I call skill stacking. I think that's going to be a real big thing in the current and future generations is, well, I'm not just someone who's good at sales or whatever. I speak French. I have got a network in this. I've got expertise in this particular area, whether it's mechanics or engineering or whatever it's going to be. And I can stack these skills in a way that's going to give me a fairly unique career. You know, I'm very charismatic. I know how to get to the point. I don't waffle. All of these sorts of things that I think, especially in today's day and age, where, as I said, there is ample information online about how to learn skills that we can then adapt and adopt into our day-to-day, whether it is the 9-to-5 job, whether it is entrepreneurship, and as you said a couple of times there, is having that underlying understanding of what it is you want from a career. I think is what you're getting at.
Yeah, I mean, you are, and we all are, unique individuals. Nobody's had our life experience. Nobody's got exactly the same thing to offer as we can, and generally, you know, learning new skills, learning new bits of information, and so on is going to help us in all of this. One of the things I would say though is that there are often different ways to do a job. So there's lots of people who do the same job, but they do it in different ways. And so we can often, you know, learn different ways to combine our skills that make us able to do different jobs in different ways. And that can be good as well. So, you know, I think what I'd generally be against is the idea that you're like a jigsaw piece and there's only one place that you fit. So yes, you're unique, you've got some unique skills, but actually, firstly, you can change, you can develop. And secondly, there are different ways that you can fit in. So somebody who's a brilliant accountant, they're probably not, you wouldn't necessarily think that they were somebody who was going to be like an amazing, you know, public speaker or whatever. But of course, there are people who cross across those things and do both of them and do them in different ways. Because there are many ways to be an accountant and there are many ways to be a public speaker and so on.
100%. I think, as you said, we can't sort of shoehorn everyone. So every accountant is the same. It's like, you know, horoscopes. Every Scorpio is the same. Every Libra is the same. Unfortunately, sorry to break it to you guys who believe in horoscopes, that isn't true.
Yeah.
So, and I think as you said, it's the same. You know, I've met accountants that are extrovert, some introvert, which I think would probably be more suited to the job, in fairness, but that doesn't mean to say that you can't be a good accountant as an extrovert. Same as a salesman. A better salesman typically would be extrovert, but that doesn't mean to say that introverts aren't better in some ways, because they actually probably listen more than someone who is, you know, talky. So I think there is a lot of metrics that you could, and I don't want to break it down into science like that, I suppose, but there is a lot of metrics that maybe you would consider to be the ideal, but actually isn't.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is a kind of sort of psychologists have a set of way of thinking about people's personalities and their interests and so on, which sometimes it can feel a bit like a horoscope. So there's a guy called John Holland who was a psychologist in the sort of mid 20th century. And he came up with this idea that there are a set of different types of people and they have different interests and they're particularly suited for different types of occupations. And he's got lots of science actually behind it. I mean, there is something in what he's saying. It's not kind of complete nonsense, as I would say horoscopes are. But I think there's a danger that kind of way of thinking, which a lot of psychologists tend to drive us towards, makes us think in boxes and makes us think in kind of, you know, to see the world in very rigid ways. And it's just a question of fit. And I think increasingly when we talk about career, we see career as this malleable, elastic process of development, process of kind of finding different ways to be there, telling your story in different ways. So yeah, I think you know, in terms of what I would advise people to do, I think it's you know, think carefully about who you are, what your values are, what your interests are, and so on. But don't be kind of bound and confined by that, and don't let anybody tell you that, well, someone like you can't be this kind of thing, and so on.
Yeah, you don't want those sort of negative people in your life who are going to say, well, you can't do that. Well, number one is yes, I can. And number two is why, as a friend or a family relative or someone, a colleague, why are you trying to put me down before I've even started? A preemptive self exclusion. Essentially, you are excluding yourself before you've even done anything, which is stupid. But coming back to what you said about the personality types, is that similar to like Myers-Briggs and the Ocean, where you're looking at openness and introvert and extroversion and neuroticism and all of those sorts of agreeableness, etc., that form part of your thing? But I think, again, just coming back to what you just said, which is just triggered, you don't want to label yourself like that either. You don't want to say, "Oh, I'm extrovert." I don't want to do a job sitting behind a desk. But actually, if it's something that is interesting to you, maybe you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's I mean, there are lots of these different tests, these sort of psychometric tests, and the ones I tend to prefer are ones which give you some kind of read on who you are. And I know from myself that I found when I first did some of these tests, I found it really useful because it made me realize I've got some strengths and I've got some weaknesses, and other people have got different strengths and weaknesses, and we're all different. And when we're doing tasks together, so when we're working in the team, it can be useful to think some of the things you're good at, other people are not good at. So what you find easy, somebody else might find difficult. And what you find difficult, somebody else might find easy. And that is, I think, a really profound observation that really helps you when you're working with other people, is to recognize that human beings are different and that we do have, diversity in all sorts of ways. I think the things that I get I'm less comfortable with are things that put you into a box and say you are like this and you're only ever going to be like this. And I would say Myers-Briggs certainly moves in that sort of direction where it says, well, you're this kind of person and you're probably not very likely to change. And I think we should be a bit skeptical of tests and approaches to sort of reflection that tell us, well, we are one thing and we're not something else, because in reality, I think we're all quite likely to change and develop.
100%. And there's something called the Pygmalion and Gollum effects, whereby if you say someone is bad, they become worse, and if you say they're good, they become better. And much like you see people on sort of online and they have their Myers-Briggs 4 digits in their bio, or INFJ, ENFP, or whatever. Yeah. And it's like, well, if you're associating yourself with that, you are probably going to become more like that because you attribute yourself to that. And anything that you do that is out of that wheelhouse, you're going to say, that's not like me. Actually, I'm more like this. But actually, that's not the case. Self-talk and self-image is a real thing. And when you see yourself in a certain way, you try and make yourself like that. And I think as well, what you said sort of or alluded to is personal brand. Do you think that career is kind of like a personal brand situation where you're not putting yourself into a specific wheelhouse, but you are building your own personal brand across a career or careers, especially in today's day and age where people, instead of working for the same business for 40 years, getting a pension and retiring, you are seeing a lot more movement, aren't you? Which is why I think your job is going to become increasingly more important as we progress through the current Geist, as it were.
Yeah, so I mean, definitely, it's. I think it's the case that if we think about people's capabilities, they, people are involved in a process of change, and they're also then involved in a process of articulation of themselves. And so one of the things we do, and we do it in lots of ways, and we do it on social media, we do it on, LinkedIn and so on. We do it in a CV. Is we tell stories about who we are and what we can do. And over time, we build up kind of credibility for those stories. And that's really what personal brand is. It's the sense that there's some credibility in the story that you're telling because people have interacted with you. So I think personal brand can be a useful way to think about this and think about how you develop your career, is that you want to become seen by the people in your kind of life community, your career community, as being somebody who has, credibility and capabilities that they can recognize. The only nervousness I have about personal brand as a way of talking about this is it sort of positions us in competition with other people. So it's like, I'm better, I'm better than you. This is what I can do, and so on. And I think the other thing that's true about careers is that we're in communities and we work with other. I mean, we almost all jobs are involving working with other people. Um, Most of us have families who and friends and so on who support us in our careers and give us advice and so on. And so I think we can think about building a personal brand. That's part of it, definitely. But we also think about building a personal network. And our personal network is about people who can help us in our career, but it's also about who we can help. So it's this idea of reciprocity that I think is really powerful in our careers and takes us forward, is that we're not just taking from other people. We're not just saying, look at me, I'm the big I am. We're also out there sort of helping people, supporting people, being part of something that's bigger than just ourselves. And I think if we put those elements together, we can both be a kind of good, supportive colleague and friend, and also be, build success, build people who want to support us and so on around us. So yeah, I think that's, I think that's where I'd be a little bit careful with the sort of the language of personal branding.
Yeah, it's interesting you say about network, because there's a whole phrase, isn't there, that network is your net worth. But I also think as well, within the sort of network situation, people always say as well, it's who you know, not what you know. But I actually did some thinking. I actually kind of disagree with that, because the people with the best networks, or the who you knows, happens because of what they know or how good they are at something. Like Cristiano Ronaldo or Messi or any of these athletes, they have got a network with everyone in the world, basically, because they could walk up to someone, they would know who they are, and they could say, oh, what do you do? And that would automatically form part of their network. And that is based on the fact of what they know or what they can deliver or how high status they are, that then allows for the who you know to become a much easier accessory to their life, essentially. Whereas if you're a nothing and a nobody, so, let's say you're you don't have a job, you're unemployed, you don't have any value, you sit in front of the TV all day eating Wotsits and drinking Diet Pepsi or whatever, the chance of you building a valuable network is probably quite small, because although people might think, well, it's kind of wrong to judge people on what they are and what they can bring, but that's exactly what people do. You've got different types of friends, people who make you laugh, people who are there for you. And it's very much the case, I think, that you still have to build value in order to generate a network. I don't know what your thought is on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so there's this French sociologist called Pierre Bourdieu, and he says he's basically interested in what makes people successful in society. And he says, well, like money, clearly, if you've got a lot of money, it really helps. But he says, actually, there are other things that function like money. He calls them capital. So social capital, that's the number of people you know, the kind of people you know, and so on. And even if you're not super rich, but you've got a really big network, it gives you all sorts of value. And the same is true of your capabilities, your human capital, your knowledge of what other people like, your cultural capital, and so on. And so what Bourdieu says is that these things can kind of be swapped for each other. So as we kind of have, if we've got a lot of capacity, if we know a lot of people, that helps us to get a better job, earn more money. Equally, if we've got a lot of money, that helps us to find a network and so on. So yeah, these things are interacted. It's definitely not right that you can kind of focus on one or the other. I mean, the other thing to be aware of with that point that you said about, well, it's not who you know, it's what you know, which is another thing that Bourdieu was very interested in, was that, of course there are people who get by because they know rich, powerful, people who have privilege, who don't really get by on their own merits, but get by because they're in an advantaged part of society. We've just seen how that worked for Prince Andrew, and ultimately it doesn't save you from everything that could go wrong in your life, but it is important. So I think we have different kinds of capital that can be really helpful to us in thinking about how our lives and our careers go.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? That you said about how sometimes people can be in a position of a high network, just down to pure chance. The whole moral luck problem, it's called, where it's not about the actions that you took, but actually just the luck of the draw. So, for example, if two people drove home drunk, same route, exact same time in parallel universes, in one, someone walked off the curb and another, someone didn't. And obviously when the person walked off the curb, they got killed by the drunk driver. Is the drunk driver any worse of a person than the other drunk driver? And the answer is probably not, because they did the same action, but actually the person that died was a result of that. And that's down to the luck of the draw, and very much so being born. You're lucky you're born in a Western country or a wealthy country or into a certain family. You're healthy. You've not died at 3 years old as people do. You have your sight, your hearing, senses, intelligence, whatever it may be. So there is a case, I think, of the cards that you have available and playing them in the best way possible, because you've seen the flip side of that, where people have been privileged and pissed it down the drain, and vice versa, started from nothing and become professional fighters or built businesses from scratch, etc., etc. So for me, it's all about personal development and growth within yourself, which will allow for all these other things, as yours been talking about, to come into fruition, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I find career so interesting, because there's all these different things going on. So, like, if we think about luck, I mean, so I've got a friend who's a professor in Australia. He's into this idea of chaos theory. He says he has the chaos theory of careers, and he says, like, lots of what happens in your career is not predictable. You could, I mean, there are elements of it that I think are predictable, and this is probably where I would disagree with him a little bit, is that I think, things like being advantaged in society, there are certain patterns that play out throughout society about who does well. But equally, you can just be somebody who's walking along one day, having a perfectly great life, and you get hit by a car, and nobody could have predicted it. It's a bit of bad luck. It just happens. So what do you do about that? Well, you can't win them all, and sometimes you are going to be unlucky or lucky, and that's going to matter. What Jim Bright, is this professor I know, says is you've got to focus on luck readiness. There's another guy, John Crumboltz. He talks about planned happenstance. You can't stop. Luck happens, shit happens, but sometimes you can be ready for it. So people who are ready for it, who react to it better. So people who are open to opportunities, people who look for ways to respond to it, who don't kind of get knocked on their back every time something bad happens to them. Those people are going to be able to roll with the punches and move on, while other people might be really set back by it. And so, there's lots of things going on in our careers. And sort of where we started, which is like, well, what type of person are you and how do you plan for it, is only part of it, because you've got to deal with luck, you've got to deal with an unequal society, you've got to deal with changes in the environment. All of these things are going on in our careers, and it's a lot of complexity to deal with.
Definitely. And as you said, it's about being ready for the opportunity. If you carry business cards with you and you end up hearing a conversation, you were ready for that opportunity. You didn't have control over what was going to happen there, but you were ready for that opportunity at all costs. And even economically, you may be in a business that has redundancies, lays people off, goes down the drain, and unfortunately you have absolutely zero control over that. But what you do have control over is what were your next moves, your skill set. Have you increased your skill set during your time at that job or not? Have you been working on any side projects? Have you been behind the scenes working on actually a new career where you've now got the qualifications for? So in some ways you can hedge your bets if you aren't sure, I suppose, on what career you're taking. Or if you're nailed down into a career, then you would put maximum force into that area. It's like the Hitler example when he went through the Ardennes during the war to get through France. He put all his forces through a small area of woodland that France weren't ready for. And I think if that's the case, if you we'll use the same example of being an accountant, you might then knuckle down and say, look, I'm going to do every exam possible, I'm going to do them as fast as possible, I'm going to be the best, so then my career progression is going to be fast accelerated.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you could develop your own capital. I mean, that's sort of one of the things we talk about. And if you're thinking about how you protect yourself against potentially, you know, negative events, then all of those things we talked about earlier, like building a network, building your capability, um, getting more skills, getting more qualifications, laying some money up, trying to pay off your mortgage. All of these things are all things that are strategies that people can use. I mean, I think it's also worth saying there are collective strategies that people can use in their career. So, being part of a trade union, for example, in a company is some protection against what the company might do. It gives you some more power. Um, I'm in a trade union here, and it gives us some way of negotiating with the university and what it chooses to do to us. And so there are we've got lots of strategies that we can use, which are both about developing ourselves, developing our networks, developing our power, and changing the circumstances in which we're in as well. So I think all of these things can be used to try and guarantee that we have some chance of building a successful life and accessing, decent work and the good life and so on.
So let's make this sort of relevant for probably the people who need it the most, because obviously career wise, you could look at people who they're already, directors, they want to get to the next level, or people who are just starting off and they want to get to this, manager's level, whatever. But what about those people who are feeling completely lost? They've got, a run-of-the-mill job. They don't even know how they got the job. Maybe it was through their mother's friend or someone else who said, here's a job application, or I can get you in here if you want a job, picking or, in a warehouse somewhere, or basic office job. And they just have that feeling every Monday morning of dread. Because I think heart attacks happen most on Monday mornings, if I'm not mistaken,
right,
for that reason.
Okay.
And so what would you say to those people? What would be the steps that you would say, look, this is where I would start, this is where I would look at? Is it, I think you talked about this before, having a map in the maze of life,
So I think, I mean, in a way, there's sort of two strategies you can use. I mean, one is trying to get out, and I think sometimes that takes quite a lot of self-belief, because people often get stuck in a rut and they find it difficult to imagine they could do anything else. And often when they try, like when people do get made redundant, very many people say, actually, I'm happier than I ever was before. I'm glad I've moved on. So there's one thing which is about looking around, finding out what opportunities are out there, maybe being willing to take a chance, change something, go and get another job, see how it goes. It doesn't have to be forever. You can, once you've moved job once, you probably feel more confident to move job again. Employers won't be too bothered. I think the days when people expected you to stay at a firm for your whole life are really over. So, if you go and work for someone for a year, it's not for you. View it as temporary and so on. I think the other thing that's worth thinking about is what's sometimes called job crafting. So is there a way I can take the job I have and make it better, make it different and more like what I want? So, maybe you want to, develop more, you want to do something more creative than you're doing. Well, maybe if you talk to your boss, you've got some ideas about how you could do some more creative things. You say, look, I think we could really improve the way this job works. And gradually over time, you can kind of shift your job into being something that you want and is more built in your image and fits around you, rather than just what you've been given. So, and there's lots of evidence that says people are often good to do this. Employers don't generally want people to move on. I mean, if they like you, they want to keep you. So if you, and especially if you've got initiative and you come up with ideas. So I think that's one of the questions is like, do you want to move? Do you want to try and find something different, something better? In which case, explore, try some different things, or stay where you are and try and make this job better. Well, how do you do that? Well, there's lots of ways that you can probably do that.
It's very much the case as well. Like that's just reminded me of, fitting yourself fitting your CV to the job you're applying for versus fitting the job for the type of person you are. I think that I see that a lot where, they look at the job spec and like, oh, let me just keyword this all and make it look like I'm that person. And then they do the job and they absolutely hate it, versus this is who I am, this is what I want.
Yeah.
What is there out there without me searching by salary and location or whatever to get the job that I'm after? And you see this as well, that people do this whole 10-year plan, become a doctor, an accountant, and then they finally do the jobs that they have trained for, and they hate it. So they've basically wasted a decade on training for something that they have done for 1 year. I know a few people have done that, doctors, accountants. They've done this whole investment, university, time, and they've ended up pivoting to something that they want to do. But I think this is the problem with how the education system entices you to go up the corporate ladder and pick one of maybe a few careers rather than, as you said, looking at picking what you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. I mean, there are some professions. I mean, and medicine. I mean, medicine is one of the ones that people often talk about, and it is difficult because it's got lots of really good things about it. I mean, it's well paid, it's high status, it's really socially valuable. Lots of people. There's lots of demand for doctors and other kinds of healthcare workers and so on. And so people do get kind of seduced into it and channeled into it and feel that this is going to be great. It'll keep my parents happy. The school's really happy because they got someone into a medical school and so on. At some point, you do have to think, well, what is it I want to do? I think, and maybe it wasn't that. But at the same time, I think you've also got to be a bit forgiving of yourself, that we all make mistakes. We all do things. I mean, I did a PhD in a subject that I pretty much have no interest in now. And I then was able to move later in life. And if I was trying to get to where I am now, the way I went wasn't the straightest line. But, I learned a lot along the way, and it's okay. And I'm like reasonably happy where I am. And so I think we have to also forgive ourselves and think that, when you look back, you can always see the straight line. You can't always see the straight line going forward. And maybe those 10 years you were training to be a doctor, at the end of it, you don't want to be a doctor, but I'm damn sure you're going to use those skills, those knowledge and so on somewhere else in your life. And so I think we have to be a little bit compassionate to ourselves as well.
100%. Life is easy in hindsight. You
exactly,
can only live life looking forward, but it makes sense looking back, doesn't it? We look through the windshield, but as we go, but then when we look back, we see where we've gone, and it all sort of makes sense. And I think that's a really important point as well, is that even the mistakes that you make, decisions, job-wise or otherwise, can be rectified, and not even rectified. They've now made you who you are. That have put you in this particular place with all the lessons you've learned to give yourself a different trajectory moving forward. So I think it's actually a good thing that things don't go perfectly, because what does? There is no straight lines in nature. And as you said, your career wasn't a straight line. I don't think anyone's really is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think getting these messages out, I mean, it's one of the things that I think when we talk about, so a lot of the work I do is thinking about how we should organize careers education and guidance in schools. And one of the things that I think we're really keen to do is get people coming into schools and talking about their careers, and not just saying, look, this is what you do as an accountant. Here's day one, here's what you do at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock and so on. But talking about how they got where they did and the doubts they've had and where things have gone wrong. And that learning from real experience, I think is really, really powerful. And it also, it humanizes career, and it makes, if people looked at me and they would say, well, I've got to this certain position, if they'd followed me along the way, they might not have been able to spot that that's where I was going. And so I think when people start telling their stories, it really helps younger people to figure, yeah, okay, I could try something, and if that doesn't work out, I'll try something else, and so on.
100%. And as we've sort of alluded to, there's so much out there that, if someone comes into school and talks about it, great, but there are probably YouTube videos of someone showing their job or talking about their job, things they like, things they don't like. I mean, anything you can probably think of, there's a video for out there somewhere. And it's about using your grey matter to try and ask the right questions, think about 2, 3, 4 steps ahead, okay,
Yeah,
what if
yeah,
this happens? And I don't like it when I've taken on the responsibility of 2 kids, a house, a wife, cars, and it's now pretty much impossible for me to change because of the requirement for this income to fund this lifestyle. For me to then pivot and go back down to earning 20 grand a year when I'm on 95 is going to be difficult and impossible, in fact, to do that without having to downsize and all these sorts of things. So this is a real important thing for me in this space, which is one of the reasons why I think this is a great conversation, is to try and get the right decision before you get into the trap stage, if that makes sense, where it's difficult to get out.
yeah. I mean, and obviously there are periods in your life when your opportunities get more constrained. So one of the things that I've been interested in is kind of midlife career, and lots of people, like the point at which your kids have left home, or maybe you've got close to paying off your mortgage or paid off your mortgage, all of a sudden like a load of opportunities open up again. And there's lots of people who maybe at the age of 50, 55 start thinking, oh, maybe I could do something different for the last 10, 15, 20 years of my career. And that, I think that's really interesting as well. So it's also worth thinking that we do make compromises inevitably in the kind of society we live in. People do make compromises and do things where they work longer hours than they want, where they work harder, where they don't earn as much money, and where they feel perhaps trapped into professions that they perhaps don't love. But it's not doesn't have to be the end. Like there's always opportunities for a second or third or fourth act in your career. And so yeah, I think one of the things we're trying to kind of push is the idea of possibility. Obviously it's not, you can't just make anything happen as you've described, really. Sometimes you've got responsibilities, and you have to turn up for work even if you don't love it, because you got to pay the bills and so on. So careers is about balancing all of these things.
So are these the type of things that because obviously you've written a book about this as well, are these the sort of topics that you're covering in the book? Is it a sort of tangible kind of textbook, or is it more posing questions about what people should think about, experiences? What's the sort of underlying premise of the message you're trying to portray to people?
Yeah, so I've written a book called Careers with my friend and colleague Ria Thompson, who's a professor in a Danish university. And so we wrote this book. It's a very small book, and it's really designed really for the similar purpose this podcast is, I think, is to sort of get people thinking who perhaps haven't thought about career, and all they've thought about career is, well, career's about climbing the corporate ladder and doing the things that I'm supposed to do and getting a good, well-paid job and so on. And what we're trying to say in this book is, well, actually, there's a lot, there's a lot of chaos in career. There's a lot of social relationships. There's a lot of interactions with other people. And so what we're really trying to do is through telling a lot of stories of different kinds of people, and we talk about lots of, we talk about everyone from Elon Musk to the drummer out of Def Leppard, and we talk about all sorts of people in this book, that to try and give examples of people who've had real experiences and how they've dealt with them, and how their career is often this kind of complicated managing of the possible, and also about the putting together of lots of different parts of your life. So it's not just about paid work, it's about thinking a bit more broadly about that. So really, in a way, I suppose what we're trying to do in the book is give people permission to think about their careers a little bit differently, and to think about their careers a bit more creatively, really. And yeah, the book's available. You can get it. You'll put a link in about it. But if you search my name, you can probably find it. But it's free to download. I mean, you can buy a print copy, but you can just download it for free if you want to see.
Yeah, literally, we'll put that in the show notes anyway. But you said creativity there. What do you mean specifically by creativity in that particular sense, anyway?
Yeah, so I think it's sometimes about thinking about different ways of doing things. So I mean, one of the things we look at for a few people in the book is we look at how people who've perhaps been through a some kind of burnout, like that might be a mental burnout, or perhaps through some kind of physical accident or something like that. And people who aren't able to work anymore. And really what we try and do is celebrate the way that they remake their lives afterwards. And career is this act of kind of creativity and thinking, well, maybe the way I worked, which proved ultimately to be very unhealthy for me and very dangerous for me, is not the way I want to work in the future. So maybe I'm going to change my life. I'm going to work, become self-employed, or I'm going to work in a very different area. I might earn less money, but I'm going to have more time for myself and for my mental health and so on. So, I think we really celebrate stories of people who've made changes, who've rethought their lives, who've found something that works for them, that's different from what might have been ultimately a kind of unhealthy behaviours in their sort of past life.
Love it, because I think, as you said as well about the personal life stuff, is that there's a whole wheel of life. You've got career, finances, health, family, hobbies, personal growth, all of these things, and this one aspect actually does impact romance. Is another one, for example. That one part, the job career part, has a massive influence actually on a lot of those other areas. Your ability to find romance, again, what type of job and things and income are you bringing in, health. Is it negatively impacting your health due to stress? What sort of finance and income are you generating from that job, etc., etc., etc.? How much time does that allow you to give towards your hobbies, interests, and personal growth? So I think that it's a real bedrock of a good life is a good career, or I mean, I don't always like the word career, but a vocation, or way to earn income, and what you're basically doing with your life. So I think that's a really important point, is that not only is it the career within itself, but the knock-on domino effect that has on all the other aspects of your life also.
Yeah, and it's both ways as well. So there's a Canadian writer called Richard Young, and he talks about how career is, he says, for young people, career is a family project. Like for most young people, they're not just making decisions on their own, which is what sometimes it's portrayed as. Certainly a lot of psychologists would sort of see this as being an individual decision, but in reality, you get round the kitchen table, your parents have an opinion, probably your uncle and your granny and so on, all have an opinion on what you're going to do. And you've got a job as the person who it's affecting to negotiate that, but you also can draw in a lot of resources and help and support from these people. And I think when you get later on, when you get married, and one of the things I'd really like to do more work on, I think there really is a need to do more research in this area, is dual careers. So what we know is that, like, married people or people in partnerships make decisions together. We don't just choose, well, this is what I want to do in my career. People say, oh, well, actually, if you're really unhappy at work, take a year off. I can support you. Or people say, I want to move to another country to work, and you have to negotiate that with your partner. So our careers are not just about us, they're also about the people around us. And yeah, like you say, having a great career will have a positive impact for your family, but also having a great family life will also have a positive impact on your career. And these are in dialogue, really, these different types of ways of
100%. So it's all intertwined, isn't it, into a life, which is why it's the wheel of life. All of these, if one spoke of that wheel is off, the wheel doesn't move. If you've got a punctured flat tire, the top of the arch looks okay, but as soon as it gets to the bottom, it goes flat, and it causes the wheel to stop rotating properly. So yeah, I think massively each aspect of the wheel has impacts on others, and as you said, it goes both ways, which is remarkable, really, in that respect. But what about the blog as well? You've got a blog, not only the book. So what's the blog about, and how can people get that, and what's the impact you're trying to deliver with that?
Yeah, so my blog's called Adventures in Career Development, and I've actually been writing it for, well, a long while, probably almost 2 decades now. So it's really been going for a long while. I mean, basically, I just throw stuff on it that I do. So if I put a book out, or if I do this podcast, I'll probably post that on it. If I do a presentation, I'll do that. And then once in a while, something will make me angry, and I'll write a whole load of stuff about it. So, maybe at the election or whatever. So, but everything I write is about career in some way. So what I'm trying to do is to, I suppose, make some of the work that we do in the university accessible to a wider audience, that says, look, actually, if you're interested in these things, you don't have to be studying a degree with us. I mean, we would obviously love you to come to the University of Derby and study a degree, but if you're interested in this, you can just find it on the blog, access it through the research and things that we make available, and and use it to inform your life in whatever way you want to do. So, and that's why I've got the blog, and I find it very useful for doing that. Really,
it's good. It sounds like a kind of scrapbook, like Hansel and Gretel, the breadcrumbs that you left sort of throughout your sort of career, little gems of information about what you've picked up along the way, which is good for people who read it, but also for yourself as well, to see how your views have changed, or what you've picked up from the past that you've maybe sort of forgot to, or no longer think about as much as you did before, which I think is good about sort of writing stuff down, because you see stuff from the perspective that you thought of at that point in time versus now looking back. It's the whole Heraclitus, no man can ever step into the same river twice, because it's not the same river and it's not the same man.
Yeah, I mean, and you'll find this with your podcast as well, is that I think having this sort of historical, I mean, I don't spend hours, wandering through my back pages really, but it is interesting to think there were things that I was very, very interested in, very, very exercised, that no longer really bother me. And yeah, just having this, I mean, I find writing, I find, I think that one of the greatest things about social media, when it works well, is it offers you an opportunity for reflection and sort of self-examination. And the blog, I think, does that really well. I used to do that a bit on Twitter and various other things. I've kind of dropped out of Twitter as it's got kind of increasingly toxic and strange. But yeah, I think these opportunities to reflect on your life are really worth having. I mean, I would really recommend that everybody has a blog of some sort, especially a professional one, because it's just a really useful professional practice, I think.
100%. And what you said about the, if you use the example of a knife, is a knife evil or not? It's like the social media thing you said, basically. Is a knife evil or not? Well, it depends. Are you cutting onions or are you stabbing someone? And it's very much the same with social media, is how are you using it? Are you using it to watch stupid videos, or are you, because there is loads of education out there on social media, and it depends on how you're using that resource in order to better yourself or not. So doom scrolling, as it were.
I mean, I do think the way social media has developed over the last few years has, I mean, I was a great enthusiast. I mean, I really loved it, the early days of Twitter and I mean, all of I've been active on lots of the social media in different ways. I think the way in which, as it's been as there's been attempts to monetize it and also to kind of use it for political purposes, really, which, I mean, I've got nothing against people using social media for politics. I do it a lot, but the fact that Elon Musk can buy Twitter and shift it all in one political direction, I think even if you agree with everything he thinks, you've got to think it's wrong that he's sort of controlling the public debate. So I mean, I do agree. I think that social media is a tool. If you use it well, it can be really, really valuable. But I think a lot more of it has become more difficult to use positively, and there's a lot more incentive to use it negatively now. And I think we need to be a bit careful about that. I'm actually struggling as to what to do about that, because I feel I've lost something that used to be really valuable to me in the way that social media works now.
I think the biggest issue with social media and phones in general is the lack of people being in the present. I saw a video recently, Adio de Strings, the Tiesto song, the old trance 90s song. There's kids there who were at the Pyramids of Giza, right? This song is playing an old school classic, and the strobe lights are going off. They're in an amazing setting, and instead of all raving and stuff, they've all just got their phones up. And I'm like, literally, just don't even like. Okay, someone's gonna do it. You're gonna get a video anyway. You can download the video offline that someone's recorded, and you were there. What's the point? You're in like the mecca of that type of music, and even the situation of where you are, Pyramids of Giza, and you're on your phone, not enjoying the moment. You're going to watch it back and tell everyone how great it was. But I could see you on someone else's phone standing there doing nothing but watching your phone screen. So I think that's is one of the biggest impacts, I think, as far as social media is concerned, is that we now require external validation more than the enjoyment of the moment.
And again, I mean, in terms of career, we've talked about politics, we've talked about luck, we've talked about yourself and your family and your community. But one of the big impacts on our careers and how they're developing now is technology. Of course, it is, and it's something that we're really interested in, and trying to think about how people can navigate their way through that. And I've written quite a bit about, what kind of ways does your career development get shaped by new technologies, but also, what kind of behaviors are likely to lead you to more positive engagements with it. I think, but I think that is changing all the time. So lots of the things that I used to think, I feel less certain about now, because I feel that the way in which the kind of technological environment we're in is becoming much more difficult for people to navigate now, really.
Yeah, I think people are really not understanding the impact that AI is going to have on jobs as much as it will do, I don't think. I think it's a Mara's law, is we overestimate the short-term impact but underestimate the long-term impact of technology, and I think that's exactly what's going to happen. We think it's going to change quicker than it will, but when it does change, the impact's going to be huge. I saw something actually today, quite funnily, an AI video of the big players, your Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Sam Altman, fat and overweight.
Oh yeah, I've seen that.
Do you see it? Yeah, and everyone's on their bike, gets absolutely jacked, and that is providing the energy for the AI data centers, which I think is an absolutely hilarious metaphor for what could potentially happen in the future. So yeah, maybe there will be no jobs, and this is all a fugazi anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. People definitely overestimate the short term. I think there's a lot of hype around AI at the moment, and of course it is having an impact. I mean, you can't pretend that it's not having an impact. But I think the idea that jobs are disappearing at an alarming rate is just not really borne out by the data. There's, it's taking time, and it's being oversold. And the reason it's being oversold is because there's a lot of people in Silicon Valley who are trying to sell their, sell shares, get investment into their companies, because their companies basically aren't making profits at the moment. And so, some of what we're seeing in this hype around AI is going to transform the world is an attempt by people trying to sort of lure in investors. And I think there's a bubble, and I think it's probably going to burst, and AI, the kind of panic about AI will slow down. But as you say, that doesn't mean in the long run there won't be some more fundamental changes about how things work. And I mean, obviously some of that depends on how the technology develops and whether it can really make the kind of breakthroughs that some people believe it will, or whether actually that doesn't happen. So, but what will also be the case is there'll be another technology along which will make a difference. So even if it isn't kind of large language models, it might be something else. And so, we need to pay attention to these things, but I think we also need to be careful about sliding into kind of absolute panic about, what's going on with AI at the moment, because the TV is often telling us that we should be panicking all the time.
Oh, well, that's news in a nutshell, isn't it? Negative news, panic. That's how they sell. It's not positivity. It's not good news. It's generally bad news that people are addicted to. So, but where can people reach out to you if they want to?
Yeah, well, I'm on LinkedIn as Tristram Hooley. My blog, as I said, is Adventures in Career Development. If you want to get in touch with me, either of those places are a good place to start. I'm pretty out there on the web. Pretty much not on Twitter anymore, but you'll find me if you look for me. So yeah, please get in touch if you've got something interesting to say or you've got a question you want to ask. And yeah, thanks for giving me some space to talk about some of these big issues around career.
No worries, mate. And is there any final comments that you've maybe it's just twigged into your head that we've maybe not mentioned, or any sort of passing comments you want to make before we obviously close off?
No, I'll finish with a kind of platitude that you will have heard a million times before. But I think this idea about career being the journey and not the destination is really one to remember. I think in everything you're doing as you're developing your career, and so yeah, don't panic too much about becoming a multi-millionaire success, but try and do have some fun along the way, and try and do something good and do something useful in society. Really.
Love it, buddy, and thanks again. I've had a great chat. To be fair, hours gone like that, and yeah, I've learned something, which is always good. So,
Brilliant. Thanks a lot.
cheers.